Greetings, this is Matt Faiello, Technical Marketing Engineer with the Cloud Networking Compute BU, and we're back with another IMM Expert Series video, server profile policy video. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the boot order policy. So with that, let's get started. We're going to show a few slides and then a quick demo. Okay, so here we are within Intersight Infrastructure Service, and if we go down to policies and then we filter on server policies, UCS server policies, we see that there's 38 total policies, but this is for FI attached as well as standalone C-Series. Now here we've actually highlighted 9 of those policies that actually apply to standalone C-Series. So we're not going to focus on those policies in this series, being that we're Intersight Managed Mode, so that necessitates Fabric Interconnect, blades, compute nodes, as well as C-Series servers that are integrated with the Fabric Interconnect. And for this video specifically, we'll focus on the boot order policy. Now, the purpose of the boot order policy is basically to delineate what hardware device you're going to boot the server to. So that could be a local device, a local drive, or it can be something remote like a SAN LUN, okay, or iSCSI on a iSCSI array. So the boot order policy can have many different variants, many different types of configurations, and some of those are listed here. We're not going to really address boot from SAN or boot from iSCSI because we'll have separate videos for those particular use cases. The boot policy is crafted in a way that applies to really many servers. So you're going to want to leverage the policy, leverage it into a server profile template, and then have a group of servers with like hardware, like drives that are able to consume that policy. Now you're going to have your choice in the boot policy of using UEFI, which uses the more modern GUID partition table, GPT, or we still maintain support for legacy boot mode using the MBR. UEFI is newer, okay. It results in faster boot times. It also allows you to use drives that are larger than 2 terabytes, okay, with more than 4 partition tables. So if you have those requirements or you're using newer server, newer operating system version, you probably want to go with UEFI. Finally, there's a secure boot option available for UEFI, and that basically ensures that the software you're using for the operating system is OEM provided software. So is the boot policy required? Well, if you're going to want a usable server, you're going to need a boot policy. But I like to spell this out. It is possible to create a server profile in Intersight, deploy that down to a server without a boot policy. You're not going to get a failure. Okay, you're just not going to have a usable server. So it's important to delineate the difference there. But like most policies in Intersight, if you do not attach them to the server profile and deploy, they're not going to prevent you from deploying that server profile. As far as recommendations, that's a tough one, okay, because it really does depend on the OS type you're using, the hardware that you're using. I tend to use UEFI because I'm usually using a newer hardware server with newer OSs. It is quicker. You do have more options for size of the drive, partitions, etc. So I recommend UEFI, but of course, ultimately it depends on your hardware that you're using, the drives you're using, as well as the OS support. As far as verification, the boot order configuration can be confirmed actually within the Intersight UI. So once you've deployed the server profile, you can go into server inventory and go to the boot section, and that is in fact updated by the discovery that takes place once you put the server profile down on the endpoint. So we'll show that in the demo. As with all IMM Expert Series videos, I like to include a slide that kind of graphically, pictorially displays how that policy is consumed by the server profile template. So it's a direct attached policy to your server profile template. When crafting the template, there's nothing embedded. So I like to show that kind of a lay of the land in this slide. All right, so let's do a demonstration of the boot policy. But really, before we even start crafting a boot policy, we have to know a little bit about the specific server that we're building the boot policy for. So here I am in Intersight. I'm in Infrastructure Service servers. I'm going to select the server that's my target here. It currently does not have a server profile assigned to it, so I will be assigning a server profile and deploying that down. But I do want to show you the inventory, and we want to go in there and look at our storage controller and get an idea of what disk capacity we have on that server. So this is as simple as it gets. This is just an M.2, so slots 253, 254 on this server. I do already have a operating system installed on this server, so there's a virtual drive created by virtue of me associating a server profile down to this server prior with a storage policy. Okay, so that's there, that's intact. And currently we're waiting on a scrub policy for IMM. It's not here today, it's coming soon. So therefore, I want to be guaranteed of a good, clean install. So what I'm going to show you is a way to guarantee that instead of trying to install over the top and maybe encountering problems, is to simply go ahead and delete this virtual drive. Okay, so in the process of doing this, you're going to absolutely wipe out the existing OS there on the server. On those M.2 drives. And a requisite for this is to have this server, is to take away the server profile from this server. So in other words, if the server profile was still deployed to this server, you're not going to be able to delete the virtual drive. So that's why we've started off with the server profile taken away. And if we can see up here, we can see that this workflow is executing. Okay, you can see that I've moved ahead and saved you the task of watching grass grow. This did take quite a few minutes because I started with a power off server, so I had to go through bias post and all that. But you can see that the disk deletion, virtual disk deletion execution workflow completed. And let's go ahead and refresh our screen here. If we go back to inventory, go to storage controllers, go to virtual drives, you can see that now that virtual drive is in fact deleted. Okay, so now we're going to go to our policies. Okay, and we're going to create a like policy. Now I've already got a policy created, already attached to the server profile that I'll deploy down to that server. But let's go ahead and walk through creating a new policy, a boot policy. And I'm going to filter on UCS server, and I'm going to select boot order. And I like to use meaningful names for my policies. This is the second iteration of this. Okay, so we are going to use UEFI. I'm not going to worry about secure boot, but I am going to make sure it's FI attached. You can use policies cross-platform, so that's your personal preference. I tend to go with policies that are specific to a given platform, but then again, I'm always pretty much using in my scenarios a B series or X series compute node. So basically, FI attached. And let's go ahead and add a boot device. So we're going to add a local disk. Okay, and for this, give it a name. And for our slot, if you look at the tooltip here, it's going to tell you what you can do for FI attach. So we're going to use actually mstore-raid. Okay, now Since we're just creating a single virtual drive with a single OS boot, okay, we're not dealing with a multi-boot scenario. UEFI does a great job of finding the boot partition, okay, the bootloader. So I don't really have to worry about populating bootloader name and path in. But if you're in a scenario where the server has multi-OS boot capabilities, then you're going to want to populate in and help steer to the correct OS per the boot policy. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and add in virtual media. Okay, and I'm just going to give it a name. And this is going to be a CIMC map DVD. Okay, and as such, if you're going to directly boot to the virtual media, you want to keep the order that it exists right here. In our case, I'm going to build out the server from the KVM. I'm going to map it through the KVM, and I'm going to show off one-time boot. Okay, so in that case, I'm going to have my local disk actually appear first in the boot order, because I don't want to ever come back and change this boot order or change to a different boot policy. Okay, so understand that building out servers manually through the KVM doesn't scale well if you have to do a lot of server build outs. You know, that's why we have an Advantage capability. Intersight Advantage has the ability to deploy OSs down to the server from within Intersight. We also have ICO. Okay, so there's better ways to do this at scale, but for the onesie twosies and you want to build it out through the KVM, this is a good way to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. Okay, so let's go to our server profile. And again, I've already got a server profile in place. It's already got that boot order here. Okay, we can take a look at that, and you can see that it is exact same as what we just built out. I'm going to go ahead and edit this server profile. It is a standalone, so I've detached it from any templates. And we're going to assign it to the server. Click next. Get the green message that it's been assigned, and now we do not have to go through all the way to the end. Okay, now if you're doing a policy change or something that's disruptive, it's beneficial to go to the summary because there's an impact analysis in that summary. So I highly recommend scrolling forward, okay, or working your way forward through the workflow. But in my case, I already know that, hey, I'm going to deploy the server profile down to the server, and I'm going to activate the server to make sure everything takes effect on the endpoint, right? So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I see the not deployed status there. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to deploy. Now it's asking me, okay, it requires immediate reboot to make this server profile active, okay, with all the settings on that endpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and reboot immediately, okay, and then I'm going to deploy. And if we go into our requests, we can see that we're deploying the server profile. Okay, we are back, and our service profile has completed the execution flow, and you can see it's all good. Let's go ahead and go back. We can see that the update inventory task has completed upon completion of the server profile deployment, and then we told the server to activate, so we can see that workflow completed as well. So now if we go back to our servers, okay, and we go back to our targeted server and go to inventory and go to storage controllers, we can see that we now have a fresh virtual drive created. Okay, so now we are going to go ahead and launch a KVM. I'm doing in-band KVM with my IMC access policy. And we can see that we are at the UEFI shell. Okay, so now we're going to take the steps to install an operating system. So if I go to my virtual media here, I want to use CIMC mapped DVD. Okay, and because I've already done this and I've already stored the media, I already have the setup here. So we're going to pick ESXi 8, and we're going to go ahead and map that drive. Okay, and we got the message here that we've successfully mapped the drive. Okay, now here's where the one-time boot comes into play. If we go to boot device here, I can designate the CIMC map DVD for my one-time boot. So I'm going to do that. Now, if I did not have the DVD, CIMC DVD in my boot policy, then that would not be showing up there as a boot device. Okay, so you definitely have to still have it in your boot device. I just don't have to have it as the number one thing in my boot policy. All right, so it's telling you here it's one-time boot. The next time the server boots, you're going to go right to that DVD. Thereafter, you're going to go to the hard drive, which is the order in the boot policy. So let's go ahead and confirm that. And we can see that it's grayed out. So we've successfully done that. Now I'm just going to reset my system. Okay, so we've rebooted the server and now we're loading ESXi. Okay, so now we're completely loaded, and now we're booting to the operating system. Okay, so our installation has completed. It's warning us to remove the installation media before rebooting, and we can certainly do that. We can eject the ISO, but we're using one-time boot, and our boot policy has dictated the local disk as being the number one device in the boot order. So we can simply just reboot to demonstrate. Okay, so we've rebooted back to our fresh install of ESXi 8. You can, in fact, still see that we're mapped with the virtual media. You can certainly eject that. But that pretty much concludes our install part of the demo. And if we go back to Intersight Infrastructure Service, go to our server. Let's go ahead and go to Inventory and go to Boot. We can see that we have some verification type information here. So the boot mode, the name of the install, okay, at least the vendor. Okay, and what type of disk we installed. So this concludes our video on creating a boot order policy and demonstration, and I threw a few more things into the demonstration, such as demonstrating one-time boot and mapping vMedia policy. Hope you were able to learn something, and stay tuned for more Intersight Managed Mode Expert Series videos.